Well, I'm out of breath, and you're probably wondering what in the world I'm doing back here. So let me take you over here and show you what I'm trying to set up. So it just so happens that I have a retaining wall that I've been working on for a long time by myself, and so it's not finished. The cap blocks aren't finished, and so I've borrowed a few of the blocks and a few of the cap blocks, and I've brought those over here and I set them up in this interesting little kind of way. Now, when I say interesting kind of way, I'm actually talking about the pattern that you see outlined in orange. This shape lends itself really well to the lower unit and allows you to slide the lower unit into it and set it on top of the blocks, and it makes a great stand for working. And you can see I've got some cloth laid down on top. So we've got the lower unit off already. We've got it in this handy dandy little setup to hold it. It's really solid in here. It's not going anywhere. It's a good work surface. So what we're going to focus on in this video specifically is replacing the impeller and the gaskets. More specifically, it's called a water pump repair kit. Now, the part number that you see on the screen is for a 2019 Mercury ProXS 115 horsepower, but it also actually is the same kit that you would use on a number of different motors. So you'd have to look up to see if it applies to your specific engine or not. Now, in the event that you need help removing the lower unit or reinstalling the lower unit, I'm going to recommend that you watch the video that I have here on the screen, and I'll put a link to that in the top right corner in case you need that. This video is just going to focus on the impeller inside the water pump housing or the impeller housing. Okay, so let's get started. And the first thing that I'm going to do is show you that I'm using a 10 millimeter. And that seems to be the best fit as far as my tools. I tried 7/16 standard and it did not fit these bolts. All right, this is about as good of a place as any to cover some of the parts that we're going to be looking at. I've gone to the Mercury part site and pulled up the parts that are applicable to my specific lower unit and the water pump. And we'll just kind of quickly talk about these as far as the order that you're going to see them. Now, I'll be completely honest, I'm one of the worst for calling things what they actually are. I will call them something generic like thing or jigamabob or what's a madoodle. So hopefully this makes that a little clear as to what I'm actually talking about. So as of right now, what you can see in this image is the coupling. That's the first thing you're going to see me. And inside that coupling, you have two O-rings. You can probably see it in the image there. It is red inside of the coupling. There's one at the top and one at the bottom. Next on the list are the 4 bolts that are holding this down. Those are 10 millimeter for what it's worth. And then you have the housing, and on top of the housing you have something called a seal face. Now for right now that's all you can see, so we'll bring additional items back up when you can see those in the video. I'm going to pull this off just to get it out of my way. I had it off a minute ago, but I wanted to put it back on there to show you when you take this apart, that's going to be sitting on there like that. So let's just take that off and get it out of the way. There is one other possibility that I should have already mentioned, and that is if you don't see this coupling when you take the lower unit out, it may still be inside the lower cowling. And then I'm going to just slowly loosen these 10 millimeter bolts, and there is not a lot of pressure on these at all. I'm not having to do any kind of crazy amount of pressure to get those off. I'm just using a 3/8 ratchet. And I don't know if you noticed or not, but I'm removing these sort of in a sequence just to keep it from binding. Once they're all really loose, I will not worry so much about that. Okay, I'm going to try to save you some time here. Once I had all of the bolts loose, I realized I needed to go ahead and remove this seal on top of the water pump housing. The kit that I purchased came with a new one, and it is way faster to just go ahead, use an X-Acto knife or a razor blade, and cut the old one off. That is, of course, assuming that you did get a new one with your kit. As you can see by looking at mine, it's cracked pretty bad in several places. Alright, so I got the bag out because I wanted to make sure that this came with this seal, and that looks like it right there. I guess it's just really dried out. I'm going to go ahead and snap this. We've got that out of the way now, and what I'm going to do is I'd like to keep things kind of where they're at as much as possible, and so I'm going to make sure all these are where they were. Okay, and now it's kind of popped loose. I'm just going to
I see something has fallen out there, but let's keep these right where they're at. If this falls out, I can already tell you that is going to be what keeps the impeller connected to the shaft. I'm just going to set that down right here. I'm going to continue to lift and make sure nothing else is going to fall out of here. All right, so I'm going to set this just like this. All right, so this is what I'm left with on here. And there are a couple of different layers of this. The first thing I'm going to do is just kind of like lift this up. And I have to remember the order that I take this off is exactly the order I want to put everything back. So I'm going to take this and I'm just going to slide this up like that. So I know that this is exactly the order that this goes back together, is how I have it sitting here.
All right, so let's stop the video here and let's pull our parts listing up again. And this time we're going to start looking from the gasket down. And what you see to the left in my hand that's visible is a faceplate. Maybe what's not so visible is that directly on top of the faceplate is the first gasket. You can see it here. It's actually the black that there's just kind of broken pieces of. Now, it's not going to be unusual for this to be broken. That's one of the reasons that you're replacing it. In my case, the other part that you can't see is stuck to the water pump housing. I just haven't turned it over yet. And then finally, I'm going to go forward in the video just a little bit to show you this image where I actually pull the lower gasket away from the faceplate just so that you can see it's there and that it is below the faceplate.
I don't see anything that causes me any kind of concern. I am going to clean it up some before I put new gaskets on it. So let's look in the kit real quick. Here's all small stuff. Here we go. Okay, so this is really cool. I really like it when they do stuff like this. There's only one way this is going to go on here. The bends in this are different and the bolt holes look like it can only go one way. We know that it was sitting just like this, and if I just lay this on top of it like this, it looks absolutely perfect. If I flip this over, nothing lines up. So if I turn this over this way and put it all back together, things are perfectly aligned. So I'm going to set this down, and I know this goes in this direction. One of these seals has gray on it and one does not. You see this little gray strip on the outside? That's very obviously the one that sits right here on top of this, just like this. And then there is another one. It's kind of pretty rigid actually, and that's this one. Now do notice these are actually made slightly different. I have a feeling it doesn't matter by what I'm seeing, but I do want to kind of check. It lines up absolutely perfect. What about this one? If I flip this one over, what happens? It's the same exact thing. If I flip it over and orient it in the wrong direction, things do not line up. So I know for sure that it goes like this. It is not going to matter that this one has this little extra piece of felt right there. But the main thing for right now is that this goes in this direction and it goes underneath this. So now I have got these in the correct orientation. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this thing cleaned up some, but I want to see how much of this I can clean out of here. All right, I feel really good about that. I'm not worried about these little pockets because I call these dead pockets. Where they're going to get installed, there's nothing that's going to be in there, and they even have little weep holes for letting water out if it gets in there, so that should probably tell you that it's not super important that that area be clean. However, it is probably a good idea to make sure those holes are not clogged. So let's see, we got this cleaned back here. I think we're ready to start installing parts. This is probably also the best time to clean this shaft off just a little bit. I am going to clean a little extra down at the bottom of this shaft because there is a seal that goes right there. And so I'm just going to kind of make sure that that's nice and clean. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to just set this down. And I'm going to use one of these to just kind of help me to get everything lined up. And that is mostly just so this doesn't move around on me or get blown away by the wind. So I've got this like this now.
Just wanted to re-emphasize one more time, those bolts are just there to hold everything in place. They are not tightened down.
It's time for us to start getting into this kit right here. I'm going to flip this over and finally get a good look at what's going on here.
Okay, let's pull that parts listing back up one more time, and we'll talk just briefly about the impeller, which you can see here inside the water pump housing that we've already mentioned, and it is this starfish looking black rubbery object. And then we have the key. Now the key sits inside of the impeller, and it is what connects the impeller to the drive shaft, and also that is what allows the impeller to turn the entire time that the drive shaft is spinning. And then finally, I'll mention this little black section that you see on the bottom of the water pump housing. That is part of the gasket that I had already mentioned was broken, and you'll want to scrape all of that off. One final thing here is that you may notice that the fins on the impeller look as if the impeller turns counterclockwise. Don't forget, this is turned over. So in fact, I can tell by looking at this image that the drive shaft is spinning in the clockwise direction.
Pretty much exactly what I expected to see. This looks like basically brand new. I see nothing at all wrong with this. It's in terrific shape, which makes me really happy because it tells me that I'm taking care of the boat. I'm not getting it into the grime enough to wear out the impeller. But I want to keep that looking just like that, because when I go to put the new one in, I'm going to have to kind of turn it as I press it down in here to get it to line up like this. And then what's more is, you can see, if I lift this up, there is that little keyway I was telling you about right there. And this is going to sit in this little slot just like this, okay? So you can see how it's sitting up in there. And this flat part of this flat spot here is where this little keeper pin goes. I know there's a professional word for it. I don't know what it is, but it goes there. And on the inside of the impeller, it goes in that little groove right there. Okay, so I'm going to show you why I'm making a big deal out of that is because the part of the impeller that is right here with that little slot in it for this keeper key is going to line up with this flat spot in the shaft right here. And just so you know kind of what this needs to look like, this shaft will have this little keeper right here, and it has to be lined up like that. The reason this is important is because here in a minute when I put this together, I'm going to want to leave this groove in that position as close as I can just to make life easier. You can move it around, you can do whatever you want, but I'm going to put mine to where when I do this little opening is straight up, just like it is on here.
Now there's another option for how you can install this, and I've seen other people do this. It's just not something I wanted to try. At this point, you can just leave the impeller right where it is with the key installed in the little keyway, and then you can actually take the housing and press it down onto the impeller while you rotate the drive shaft in a clockwise direction. Ultimately, you can do it whichever way you want to, but I felt like the way I'm going to show you was a pretty easy way to do it.
If I take this out of here, there's the keyway, and it is pointing straight over this way. We'll get the old gasket out of here. You probably do want to try to clean this up pretty well to keep the water from leaking around it. I'm just cleaning this is all I'm doing. I'm just going to end up lifting it up. Now I notice that same little icon or whatever it is, that same little mark is on the bottom side of this. And let's see if there's a part number. And the part number is on the bottom side as well.
So what I'm trying to determine here is whether or not it matters what direction I drop this impeller in, because it's very hard to tell whether there's a difference or not. So I'm going to emphasize some lines that are on the impeller that were made when it was molded. And I'm going to show you here in white is this line that I'm referring to. It's just a little extra plastic where it was molded. And from the best that I can tell, the only difference between a top or a bottom to the impeller is what I've drawn here in green and orange. And on the green side of that mold line, there is less space than there is below the mold line where the orange line is. And you'll hear me talking about part numbers or little icons that are stamped onto one side or the other.
So even though I don't think it matters, I can't tell for sure, and I don't want to take a chance, because I do notice the seam in this rubber is further on the right side than it is the left side. if you see this little seam that goes all the way around this, you'll see there's more on the left than there is on the right. And the new one, I'm just going to set that out of the way. The new one has that exact same thing. There's more of the seal on the left than there is on the right. So we're going to put it back in here exactly how it came out of there. And so the trick now is getting this down in here. And again, remember, I'm going to try to line this up on this side. So I'm just going to kind of pinch these a little bit. Okay, so it took a minute to kind of press it all where I wanted it to be. But a couple of things I want to show you. One is I'm going to press all these down until they're flat against the base. And then it's in the same orientation that this one was in. I'm going to turn this over, and you can kind of tell it's not quite lined up like it needs to be if you look at this hole right here. So I'm just going to press it up just a little bit, and now it's lined up really well. The other important thing is this is straight across this side. This little bitty indentation in this is on this far right side, holding it like this. If I turn it like this, I can see that on the far left side, holding it this way. And that's exactly where it needs to go. So the next thing to do is to get that back on here. So I'm going to take these out. I got to open this little bag. You're going to have some extra things in here depending on which motor you get. From what I'm seeing, if you have a Verado, for example, there's an extra O-ring in here just for that. This, I believe, is for the Verado L4 and L6 motor. We will not use this in my application. It says something about that in the instructions, that this is actually for a different motor, that it does not get used in this case. I'm going to take this new little keyway and put it on that side and kind of hold it. You just have to fool around with it, and then all of a sudden you'll see that it goes down in there. And you can tell now that it's connected by the way it's trying to move everything around. So I've moved my washers a little. I'm not too worried about that, because all we're going to do is put them back where we know they go. I'll do what I did the first time. I'm just using this to kind of help me get everything lined back up. So I've got this on there. I know it's on there because it tries to turn if I try to turn the shaft at all. And now I just have to line these up. I'm going to just put that in just a little for right now. All right, that's starting to get everything lined up really good for me. You don't want to strip these. Take your time. This one, I have looked in my book for torque specs. I cannot find torque specs for this, but I can tell you it was not torqued down very hard at all. I'm going to go simply by what I felt when I was taking them off. Do not tighten down one of those all the way down. Do it in some type of pattern. Switch back to this one. I'm going to literally just snug these up, and that's about it. Literally just snug. Okay, we're going to take this little guy right here. You can see it's kind of mushroomed out at the bottom. The mushroom flat end goes down on the shaft.
So what I'm going to recommend you do at this point is go ahead and take your marine grease, Mercury calls it marine grease 24C with PTFE, and put a coating of this grease all over the shaft from the top all the way down to the water pump.
Now I'm hoping that this is not super hard to get this on here. That's got it started, but now that it's started, they gave you this really cool little black cap that I believe I'm going to be able to just put on here and press.
Yeah, trust me on this one. If you've greased it from the very top all the way to the bottom, it will go on extremely easy. You won't have any issue at all, and that little tool really comes in handy to push it all the way down easily. So in this next part of the video, you see me and I'm talking about, hey, let's just take this grease, let's put it all over the shaft. But the reality is you should do that before you get to the point you see I am here. I mean, watch how fast that goes on. It's like ridiculous.
I basically just pushed all the way down until it was on top of the impeller housing, and then I just seated it really well. And I'm going to take that off. And now that I actually have that out of the way, I'm actually going to put just a little bit of extra grease back on this. Literally just to put a protective coating on it. That's all that's for. You may recall me talking about this piece of plastic. Well, there are orange O-rings up inside here. This is going to be the time to replace those. All right, I'm going to show you what I'm going to use to take this apart. They actually make O-ring pickers. I don't know of a better way to describe it, but it's a tool with a little curved tip that's meant to put down inside things like this and pop your O-ring out. That's sort of a specialty tool that I don't have, but I do have this little micro screwdriver set.
If you don't have one of these, you seriously need to get one. This is the handiest little thing you can find on Amazon.
That I personally think is so handy. So the way this works is that just goes in there just like that. So you've got yourself a little micro screwdriver. So there's my little screwdriver bit. You can see the orange inside there. And there's a groove that it sits in. I'm going to kind of go around that groove first off just to make sure it's loose. As I'm kind of going around, I'm also pushing down. And what I'm trying to do is get behind it. There we go. And you'll eventually, as you do that, you'll see that it pops loose when your screwdriver is behind it. And it just falls out. I'm going to clean that up a little bit, and then I'm going to install the two new ones. I think that's about as good as I'm going to be able to get it. I've put it in there, and I'm pressing the seal into one groove, and now I'm just going to work this down.
I really don't know why I called it a seal. It's an O-ring as far as I'm concerned. And once you're finished with the first side, just flip it over and do the same thing for the second side.
And just push it down into the groove it goes in. And then I'm going to take this finger and just push the rest of it down, and it's pretty much automatically going to go right into the groove.
Okay, so automatic may be a little bit of a strong word. It didn't just automatically go into the groove, but it did fall into it fairly easy. And I mean, look at this thing. It's pretty beautiful, right?
And then this goes here. I tried to clean this off the best I can. Then I'm going to take this, and remember, I'm going to put it to where the letters are upside down, and I'm just going to kind of work it down on here. And with that, we are ready to reinstall this on the boat.
And then just as a final reminder, you'll want to cover those splines on the drive shaft really well with the Mercury marine grease, the 24C with PTFE. And with that, you're ready to reinstall the lower unit into the upper cowling of the motor. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I really appreciate it if you have watched it to this point. I really do. And maybe consider giving me a like and a subscribe if you feel like this type of video is helpful to you. Thank you so much. God bless. Have an awesome day.